Well, let's head to Moscow now, where James Beardsworth is waiting for us. He's a reporter for the Moscow Times. James, Russia and Ukraine have woken up to the news that Putin has effectively ordered an invasion of Ukraine. The world has been warned many times that this was going to happen, but when it does finally happen, is it still a shock?
Yeah, it's a massive shock. I think the feeling amongst Russians, certainly for the last 2 weeks, has been that Putin's kind of deploying an aggressive sort of diplomacy. He's trying to sort of sound the sirens for war to make different countries come to the negotiation table, and then getting that seal of approval that Ukraine won't be allowed to join NATO. Waking up to the news this morning, it's shocking. When, like, what Putin's plans are, we initially thought that perhaps he wanted to move into that eastern part of Ukraine to take the Donbass region. We're seeing reports that actually Russian troops are moving over the sort of more northeastern border of Ukraine, as well as from Belarus as well. And we're also hearing reports of explosions from sort of major cities up in the east of Ukraine.
How do the Russian people feel about this? Are they privately behind Putin?
No, absolutely not. And that's the interesting thing. That's why what makes this particularly shocking is the fact that in 2014, when we saw the annexation of Crimea, that came with huge boost to Putin's popularity back home. The Russian people thought that the sort of ethnic Russians that were in Crimea at the time, their rights weren't being respected by the current Ukrainian government. This is something that is not the case in this escalation. Russians that I've spoken to certainly don't want war. I was out on the streets of Moscow last week. If I can actually just read to you a couple of things that some Muscovites said to me. One 19-year-old Lisa said, I think we shouldn't get ourselves into a conflict. We need peace. We don't need a war or a hostile relations with anyone. Another one of the interviewees said to me, Putin is very smart. He wouldn't allow war, especially not between Ukrainians and Russians. We are one people with almost the same language. Why would we fight our brothers? So that just gives you an idea of the sort of shock this morning waking up to the news.
So how far do you think Putin will be prepared to go, James?
That's a very good question. The president has outlined today that he doesn't intend a military occupation. How far he will go is anyone's guess. I don't pretend to know what goes on inside the head of the Russian president. I think so far what's happened is a shock. Whether he will sort of hold his military forces and then sort of use this initial attack as a way in which he can get that approval from NATO that Ukraine won't be allowed to join the alliance is something that's on the table still, but it's looking increasingly unlikely.
Putin's address announcing the special military operation appears to have been pre-recorded. What does that tell us?
Well, this whole thing has been sort of run a little bit like a circus. There was on Monday, I think it was, there was a Security Council meeting where there was a discussion taken about whether Russia should recognise the Donbass as independent republics. We saw that aired live on TV as an alleged live address. It turned out like it wasn't a live address. So it would seem that this whole thing has been scripted for a while. Remember that the sort of build-up on the Ukrainian border has been going on for nearly 4 months now, since November last year. As well as the fact we've also seen southern airports in Russia close until the 3rd of March is the information we're getting this morning. So whether that's any sort of telltale sign about what the Kremlin has planned over the next 2 weeks is potentially another thing to look out for.
Really interesting to hear from the Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, who gave a speech in Russian overnight, making an emotional plea, especially to Russian citizens, and telling them that they are being misled on the war and on what's happening in Ukraine. Are the Russian people getting the truth on the conflict, do you think?
Not wholly, absolutely not. We're seeing sort of media reports come out of the Donbass region that Russia recognises as two independent republics this week, saying that there's shelling being taken out by the Ukrainian forces. That is certainly not the case. It would seem that the aggressor here is certainly on the side of Russia and the militias in the Donbass. So no, there will be a spin, I would imagine, being put on it by the Kremlin in the next few days to try to sort of stir up this agenda that Ukraine is on the offensive. Now, we've seen in Zelensky's speech, he says, we will defend our nation. We will not attack, we will defend our nation.
And do you think that Russians, just ordinary Russians, feel sympathy for Ukrainians who are right now fleeing or fighting off attacks?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's very clear that the Russians don't want war. First and foremost, we've seen, as a result of the pandemic and the last few years, a stagnation set in the Russian economy. I was speaking to a friend the other day who said, why would we have war when there's not even a nicely paved road to my parents' house? Russians don't want war. There will be media reports that we'll see come out over the next few days saying, why aren't we seeing Russians on the street? Where is this rejection? Russians want this war. I would really push back on that. I would say that is not the case. There has been protests we've seen, but in very, very, very small amounts, because, of course, certain laws in Russia require you to get a sanction to go out into the streets and protest. They won't be sanctioned. It will mean that any sort of protestations against this will be quickly cracked down on.
James, so good to get your thoughts tonight. Thanks so much for your time.